it could be something as simple as a time difference, or not completely understanding an instruction. So to understand how to handle misunderstandings and possibly minimize them is understanding what the root problem really is. It's just basically two parties not fully understanding each other the way they think they should, is my thoughts on that.
Mm.
I absolutely agree with Leslie with what she said when it came to what is the root cause of it. Or, even just, for example, it happens or misunderstanding happens because let's say there's lack of communication or there's no active listening on one part or the other. And like what she said, time difference, or even just a simple missing word or a phrase or something that's maybe relate to, but then lack of information or missing more details, perhaps, for example, on a certain instructions, or when you're told, like for myself, a lot of it when my coworkers and I would be relayed messages to or important instructions from our, let's say, managers or bosses at work, and they forget even just one sentence out of that whole instruction, then of course even if we do our due diligence and our part for our work, for example, our designated assignments, there's always that one particular thing missing because we were not given the full instructions in the first place. So that's where the misunderstanding happens. And of course, our work won't be complete without a complete instruction.
Of course. And I think also that stemming from that too is assumptions, right?
Yes,
Maybe
that's another.
the person who's giving the instructions thinks they're being very thorough because they've thought about it in their mind and the way that they understand something. So they may not fully communicate every small detail because they assume that, but you should know this already. So I think with misunderstandings also comes hand in hand assumptions that shouldn't necessarily be made.
I have to say, I have to say I'm a bit guilty of that, what you just mentioned, Leslie. Where, like, there had been times where I mentioned something to someone and I forgot that I've had the conversation in my head. So what I told them is basically just a skeleton of the information, just just a structure of the information, like not the entire information itself. And then I get confused when they follow up when we was like, wait, did I already tell you? And then I remember, oh wait, I had the conversation in my head, but I didn't relay this information to the person that I needed to relate it to.
Oh no,
Like
that happens all the time.
Yeah.
We and life is so fast paced that sometimes we forget. So in my work, I supervise a group of employees, and I found that sometimes where I realize I don't think I told you this yet. In my mind, I did. It's like I go through all the emails and communications I've sent out. I'm like, I actually didn't send this out. So, okay, I'll take that on myself, that I'll clarify that. But, again, it's understanding that whatever information that needs to be relayed is very clear to the person who needs to hear it.
Yes.
Because like in terms of like what you did mention earlier, but sometimes it's different when it's on, like, just on our mind. Even with when you're having a conversation with someone, when you're talking to them, right? Like your experiences, your mindset, what your intention or your focus is during the conversation, it might be different from what theirs are. So there's sort of a what's the opposite of overlap? There's a sort of
A
like
gap.
you're miss a gap. Yeah, you're kind of like missing each other's point. Like you're both making points, but you're missing each other's points because like you're both thinking of your intention during the conversation, like what goal you're trying to meet during the conversation is like different from each other. So that's like for me, that's like one of the ways that or one of the causes of a misunderstanding that has happened to me is like just a difference in intentions where
Mhm.
like for me, I'm focusing on this aspect of the conversation and they're like focusing on a different aspect of the conversation, and we just felt like we weren't meeting in the middle. So like just for me, yeah, that's like that has been a cause of a misunderstanding. So I know you both mentioned sort of like the kind of like when you're working like on on a team, but now going into like more like personal relationships when you're maybe with misunderstanding with like maybe your friends or your family, like how has those like happened, or what has been the cause of them? Is it sort of like similar or like totally different?
I I think they're still similar because the root cause is still there, right? You're both
Mm,
not understanding what the other one is trying to say, or but I think in personal relationships, I think that's where sometimes the cut feels deeper, right? Because
mm,
you think that with your family and with your friends that you think similarly. So again, there comes the assumptions, right? You assume that everybody thinks the same way as you or processes the things the same as you. So especially the closer you are to a person, you almost feel more hurt when there is a misunderstanding because you assume that you have um, that common way of processing and thinking about things. And we have to realize that as humans, we're all unique, and we have a lot of similarities with each other, especially amongst our friends. But we also have to understand we do have our differences in the way that we think, the way that we process. And I think if we're just more aware of that, and also to maybe not take things like it's not a personal attack,
mm,
that you may have said something that I don't fully understand, or vice versa, right? And that's where things get kind of um, put in a gray area, I think.
mm,
Yes, I agree, Leslie. And EJ, personally, it's really different. Like what she mentioned, the cut is in terms of, so you,
which
as
I
human
got no,
beings,
I get
yeah,
it.
we tend to make mistakes, but in terms of in our personal level, especially with family or a person or a special person we're in a relationship with, if we want to progress in the relationship, if we want to make the relationship work, it takes work to make relationships,
Yeah.
and having misunderstandings definitely is a normal part of any kind of relationship.
Yes.
However, when it comes to our personal level, we need to be more prepared for it. And we
Mm,
need, I don't know about you, but sometimes I try to avoid confrontations, especially when I know that the other person I have to speak with is very tough to talk to, or a difficult person, whether if it's a family member or a sibling or a friend or someone you really deeply care about. So we really also have to be, like what Leslie said, be self-aware, be mindful of our behavior. So in other words, you also want to already prepare yourself with that kind of conversations, whether you are the one willing to start to fix the problem or the other way around. So, of course, you also need to consider the environment you're in. What if they really want to speak with you in a very personal level?
Mhm.
So, find a quiet place, a place that you, or just maybe the two of you, to avoid distractions, because it's so, we can easily get distracted when there's so many things going on between
Yes.
us. And
mm,
sometimes when there's so many things going on between us, just like traffic or cars honking or somebody yelling across the street, and you're trying to listen to the person in front of you, but you can't, because all of a sudden you're now having, listening to all these different sounds and noises around you. So it's also very important to consider the environment you're in. So,
Mhm.
because again, that can also be a distraction, and it can
Oh,
lead to
absolutely.
misunderstanding, right? And
mm,
so, when it comes to personal level, we really have to take it to heart. Like what Leslie said, we shouldn't take it personally because we care about them. That's
Mhm.
the difference. We really care about them. I mean, at work, we do care about them also, but it's on a different level. And we have to separate
Mhm.
that from our personal life. Work is work. And when you get home, you also still need to deal with problems at home if we have one, and misunderstanding can be one of them. So we have to be very careful with also how we behave towards that. And again, like I said earlier, if you want to fix a problem and have a good relationship with the people you care about, we have to be willing to understand them in, or by all means, with whatever it is, how they speak, how they listen, and everything else. So if we have to cater or make it some adjustments on our end, then so be it. And then we can also tell them, would you be willing to do this with me? So that way, you both can agree with the certain terms and conditions, and in the end, just fix the problem.
I think that's a really important point to make, is that all relationships take work, even working relationships, to be working with your coworkers, even employees that work for you, or even your own managers. You have to be cognizant of the way you must deal with them. And again, like, it takes work to learn that. And so taking it even to the personal level, it takes work. It takes real work. You sometimes it happens, you meet somebody and you kind of vibe immediately. So you think, oh, we click right away, everything's going to work out. And then you hit that roadblock, right? You hit the one thing you might not agree on, or you might misunderstand each other on. And it takes you aback. But you're right. If you value that relationship as much as you think in your mind, then you would work on it. You would work to say, hey, let's sit down and talk about this, or let's talk this through. Nothing intimidating, nothing confrontational, but be willing to acknowledge we have this difference, or we have this misunderstanding. Let's talk it through so it doesn't affect our relationship.
I like what you mentioned about assumptions, because I feel like that's like just something that I noticed in myself, and also something that I notice is pretty common when it comes to like misunderstandings. Is like the assumption that when you vibe with someone, when you kind of make this assumption, oh, we think the same way, which like there's some truth to it, where like you might think similarly. I believe that's an important distinction to make. You think similarly but not the same. Like
Yep.
there's still going to be differences in how like, let's say, like when something does happen that affects, the both of you. You would still take, like each of you would still take it differently, right? Like for you, it might not be something, that's like too that might not affect you too much, but it might be something that will affect them, a lot. And that it can be the cause of like a misunderstanding, when you're like, what's going on, like I didn't realize that would affect you that much, right? Because you've already sort of like made an assumption that, oh, we know we're best friends, we vibe, like then then it's a given that we think the same, which is not always true. It's not always true that you think so. There's like little differences, right? Even if you do think similarly. So that's one of I like that how you brought that up, because that's like one of the things that I didn't really uh think of. But I was waiting for someone to bring this up, and this is something that was mentioned to me when I was writing this rundown, that I think is also a good point to make. It's like, like when you this is going now into like the argument side of misunderstandings, is that when sometimes when you feel like emotional, you might preemptively like make a conclusion. So sort of like the assumption as well, that like, why are you saying these things? Like, is this to hurt me? Like, are you saying this to hurt me? Like, why are you calling me out? Like, is this like, what is like, you might misunderstand the intent, right? Which is
Yeah.
another
Intent
point.
intent in an argument, if it gets to the point of argument, is very powerful. Are you intending to start a discussion that turns into an argument? Like, was that your goal? Was that your intent? Were you looking to start a fight? Or are you trying to solve the differences in what you're thinking? Like, it's different if you're arguing for the sake of being right, or you're arguing for the sake of clearing whatever's between the misunderstanding. So intent is a very important part in the way we speak.
Yeah,
We should speak with a clear purpose, and if we don't, then that's where more misunderstandings can happen.
and then we have to, I know, right? We have to like really analyze that, since like I would say it's common to like make that assumption, right? That because what they said hurt us, then the intent was to hurt us. But like I would say 9 times out of 10, especially if it's someone like really close to you, like let's say your friend, your family members, like the intent is to solve the no, to solve the problem, but to clear the air, because we have to remember, sometimes we forget this when we're arguing with someone. We have to remember that they care about us. That's why they're having that conversation with us. That's why they might have confronted us in the first place, right?
Mhm.
'Cause, they cared about us. They're like, oh, like I feel like you're doing this wrong, or you're dealing with this sort of like in the wrong way, right? Where we might feel called out, but we have to remember that they're doing it because they cared. They cared enough to have a conversation with us. Right? And you both sort of like touched into this earlier, so I do wanna ask you guys, in terms of like dealing with like with misunderstandings slash with arguments. Uh, what ways have you found like effective in terms of like dealing with them, with those like when you're now in this space where an argument or a misunderstanding is happening? Like, what have you found effective in terms of dealing with
For me, I first, let's say if I ended up starting the argument or misunderstanding, which of course, again, as human beings, we don't mean to, right? But sometimes when we have all these mixture of emotions, or maybe we're just having a bad day, for example, and they caught us off guard, and they just push their buttons and said other things on top of that, when you're just trying to breathe or just trying to calm yourself down
it?
from that moment or during that moment. So I would then think about it, contemplate, acknowledge what I've done, clarify the matter, and find solutions right away, because I'm not one to sit without having to solve a problem, especially let's say I work with that person. I'm going to give an example. Is let's say I have a very, very difficult coworker who does not like to work with others. And so I finally had the courage to ask her what the problem is, or what is it about teamwork that she didn't like. And so she finally opened up and I said, but here it is. We're here. We're in this situation. We still need your input. We still need your help, and we can't do this without you. And at the end of the day, it's a team effort. So, is there any way we can work around this? I definitely agree. You're frustrated with so and so and so. Let me know how we can be of help. And I always say we, because there are other people involved.
Mhm.
No, but on a personal level, she then now asked me, well, I'm comfortable working with you. So I started off with that. Then I had to converse with the other teammates, right? So I did my part in being the middle person. I did my best to understand both parties. And eventually I sat with all of them and I said, would you be willing to meet together? Just no arguing, no, just us working together, and let's do our best to fix whatever the root cause of the problem is and see if we can move on forward with
Mhm.
with what we need to do, because if not, then I am now compelled to take it at a higher level.
Mhm.
So that was my solution, and everyone had their input. At the end of the day, also changing the topic out of the norm, out of the conversation with work. I each got to know them more. We kind of talked about your favorite foods, your favorite movie, or your favorite sport, for example, just to get out of, everything out of their system. And at the end of the day, I am so grateful. I'm so glad that each of them are willing to make the sacrifices, even though they don't like each other. I mean, deeply, I can see that. And I did mention that. I said, it's not about liking each other to get work done. It's just about getting together, bringing in the table because they saw what we are all capable of, and putting it in this project and get it done. And that way, we get it accomplished, and our boss doesn't have to worry about each of us fighting over what needs to be done, this and that. So if we can fix it at this level, let's do it. And if not, then I guess we have no other choice but, to go up the hierarchy. And they were willing to do it. So I'm glad that it worked. And even if, let's say, I caused a problem, I would speak to the person and I would sincerely ask the person, please give me a few minutes of your time. Again, I would of course, do my best to regulate my emotion prior to the confrontation, and then bring up, what I've done. If it's my fault, I do acknowledge it. I apologize. I've been forgiven, and vice versa. If I'm the one who got, cut deep with a hurt words or maybe some other form of, whatever it is, by all means, I also get and forgive and move on and just do our best to get along. But in a personal level, when I care deeply about people, or the person I care about is the one that needs to be, with our problems need to be fixed, I'm all about fixing it. That's just because I don't like arguments. I don't like yelling. I don't like having misunderstandings. I just want to do my best to also be a good person, to be a part of their life. And even if, let's say, we have so much differences, I'm all about being flexible, adaptable, and understanding, and just love the person for who and what he is or she is, or the people for who and what they are. Because I am a believer that any kind of behavior can be learned. And I also see, like Leslie mentioned earlier, I see a special thing or a special attribute in each individual. Doesn't matter who they are. Doesn't matter how old they are. I believe deep in my heart that everyone is special in their own way.
Oh, I completely agree. I'm the person, though, in the disagreement who their natural reaction is to become defensive. And I go through my Rolodex in my head of everything that's happened. What did I do? What was my part? Things like that. But I would like to say that as I've matured as an adult, I've learned to, again, focus on the root cause, right? Of course, emotions can take on, a bigger part sometimes. And I think as I've grown older, I've learned, is it worth it to have 20 minutes of an argument that absolutely goes nowhere just because, or do I really want to get to solving the problem? Because that's really truly what it needs to be, whether it be at work, whether it be at home, whether it be with your friends. I mean, you made a good point too at work. I mean, I have to do the same thing as a supervisor. There are misunderstandings all the time between groups, between employees, and most of the time I have to play the middleman, trying to figure out, what was done wrong, what was the true facts of the situation. And it really is, you have to prepare yourself for those type of confrontations. You have to be level-headed enough to make sure that what you're discussing are facts and not assumptions, not people's conclusions, people's opinions. A lot of resolving misunderstandings is really relying on fact and really bringing out the facts. So I also agree with you on the fact that I do feel that every single person has something to bring to the table. Like we all have our strengths and we all have our weaknesses. That's for sure. But I think if we can draw on people's strengths, especially when it comes to teamwork, that's how you can engage everyone to work as a team. Like, you may not like each other, but we all have one common goal, and that's to do our job. So therefore, we need to work together somehow. And this is where I see that you're excelling in. If you agree with me, then that's what we can do with you, right? I personally, as a leader, I'd like to say that I like to accentuate everybody's strengths and help them work on the opportunities that they have to grow. So, like, if you say, I'm not great at, I don't know, riding a bike. I don't know the example I came up with in my head just now. You know, I will help you to ride that bike. I'll give you all the resources you need to ride your bike. But again, it's a matter of getting down to the root of everything. Like let's comb away at all the superficial. Let's get down to what the problem really is. Is it really as big as we think? Maybe not. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's really small, but it's like overcast by other, like you said earlier, distractions.
Yes.
And it sounds like it's bigger, but when you really get down to the bottom of it, it's really not.
I love you both brought up or you both mentioned or go right into the into like getting to the bottom of it, to solving it, and then you also going into yung how do I word this? Going more into a compromise. That's the word I was looking for in my head. Going into like a compromise, right? That works, especially if you're sort of like the middleman in let's say in a misunderstanding. It's like finding a compromise, finding a place where they can get together and like like talk about it, and actually just wanted to I know wanted to acknowledge it as well, since like for me I was I was the type that got like really emotional when I was in an argument. Like I have been the type to
Me
get like
too.
really emotional, right? And
Me too.
like it's no it comes afterwards where I I realized now, oh, it was my misunderstanding that caused it. So being able to acknowledge it, like especially when you both mentioned it, when you're the cause of the misunderstanding, being able to acknowledge it, to apologize, right? That, oh, I know, I'm sorry, I know I made the misunderstanding because of this reason, right? Like for me, I would say going back into like what I mentioned previously, like it's sometimes it's the distraction. Like when I'm distracted with something else, or like when something happened like earlier in the day that already kind of like made me feel sort of like emotional already, and then getting into getting into a discussion with someone that turns into misunderstanding, turns into an argument. Like I wasn't able to I know to keep calm. But when like now, yeah, now that's also what I know. Also what I try to do, right? When I start to kind of like feel it, like my go-to is to like to take a pause, take a step back, like figure out, oh well, like what are like what Leslie said, what are the facts of what are the facts of this discussion,
and
right? What are
and it's definitely a skill. It's a
Mhm.
skill that you learn.
Yeah.
um because your first I think your natural reaction is to argue, to
Yeah.
get emotional, to be defensive, right?
Mhm.
So I think it's, again, back to intent. Like, well, actually, there's another point. Misunderstandings itself can be misunderstood. You might be
Yeah.
coming up to someone to clarify something. Like, there
Mhm.
isn't a true misunderstanding, but you see there's something off. So you go to
Mhm.
talk to that person just to clarify. You're not confronting, you're not accusing. But their interpretation of it is, well, why are you coming after me? Why are you calling me out? And it's like, no, I'm literally just asking a
Yeah.
question.
I just
So
want
there's
to know because
misunderstandings in just the approach sometimes.
like you're just like, oh, I just wanted to check on you because you seem like kind of off today. I just wanted to check on you. But Yeah, it's like from, and you can feel it in yourself, right? You can feel it in yourself when you're starting to feel like emotional. Like, let's say in that situation, when someone approaches you like, "Hey, are you okay? You seemed off today, right?" Like when I start to feel that in myself, that's like, that's kind of like your sign to be like, okay, like I might be feeling emotional, therefore, like I might not be getting the, like the facts. That,
Yeah.
because then there's the element of like the emotion, right? That's, well, sort of, it sort of clouds like your
Mhm.
ability to, I know, your ability to see the fact of the conversation, but you're, like you said, you make that assumption. You can make that assumption because you feel emotional, but when you get down to it, when you comb through that, you realize, oh, it wasn't that deep. They were just checking in on me. They just noticed that, like they just noticed that I wasn't talking as much today. They noticed that I might be staring off into space. So they wanted to, I know, they wanted to check on me. Like
Mhm.
that could be the, like that could be the fact of it. But because you felt emotional, you might not get to that conclusion right away. So the solution I found was to, like when I start to feel emotional, it's like take a step back, like hold on, let's let's figure this out. See if there's something I'm not, I don't know, see if there's something that I'm not getting here, or something that I'm not
Mhm.
understanding here. Because, like there have been a lot of circumstances that I feel could have been made easier if only I didn't jump to assumptions right away because of emotions.
But
Right?
see, you learn that now, right? So you're aware of it, and I think that's it. It's as you learn how to navigate through different various misunderstandings, I think that's where the learning process comes in, right? You learn that you need to take a step back if you start feeling it build inside of you, but it's also like, um and I think that's also part of maturity too, is again not wanting to be right, but wanting to right the problem. Not you, but the problem.
Mhm. Yeah, I love it. I love that. I know that wording. But your intention is not to be right, but to make it right, like
Yes.
to make the situation, to solve the problem, and that's, something to keep in mind when you're trying to solve a misunderstanding, is that your goal is to solve it.
Hmm.
Right? Your goal is not to win the argument. to I know
What's important also to be aware of how you say things,
Yes.
your
I
expressions,
like.
your gestures, right? Because let's say you wanted to clarify something with someone and you said, "Hey, you said, I just wanted to clarify." And then, of course, the first reaction of the person say, "Why are you attacking? Whoa, 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 whoa! Why are you attacking me right now with that tone?" But if you
Hmm.
said, "Hey, let's say, hey, EJ, yesterday you mentioned this. I just want to make sure I don't assume anything, but just
Hmm.
to clarify, these were your words. So, and this is how I feel about it, or this is how I understood it.
Yes.
Am I right, or did I misinterpret that in
Hmm.
some other way?" So your reaction would be, "Oh, no, no, I meant this."
Yeah,
So
you're
yeah,
already
you already, yeah, you already
disengaging.
fixed it. But if the
Yeah.
first reaction is, "Why are you attacking me?" Or if somebody said, I'm sorry," or if somebody's apologizing to you, and let's say they have a really strong personality, for example, and you're the receiver, and then the first thing they said is, "I'm sorry about yesterday." And your reaction is, "Well, if you didn't this, then there you go again," right? You stir up another kind of problem. So as a receiver, you also need to be mindful of your behavior and say, "Okay, okay, listen, the reason why," and then you just, if you know that somebody is a little bit, like again, with a strong personality, like what you said earlier, we can, back off, be a little bit uh, more patient with them, right? Because everybody's different and everybody deals with situations
Hmm.
differently. But when it comes to any kind of problem, there is no, communication can solve a lot of problems. but it's just how you deliver, how you communicate with that person, especially if you know how their personality is. So if, let's say, if it's a new person, right? When we were talking about, ooh, I vibe with that person, he's this or she looks this. And then when you're having that first conversation, you click right away. But then again, you don't know that he or she has this kind of attitude when it comes to, let's say, misunderstanding or being misunderstood, or when they, get angry. So again, like what Leslie said earlier, we cannot assume. We can only go by about, of course, facts of how they really are, and observe them, and then work around, the situation depending on what it is, whether if it's an argument or a happy conversation or misunderstanding. And that way we can now then approach the dilemma or the predicament in a positive manner. Because again, uh, I am a believer that no, I've said it earlier, no behavior or new behaviors cannot be learned. So let's say me too. I used to be very sensitive, like one little word, I would either cry or I would walk away from the conversation and I said, forget this. I don't want to get involved with you anymore. And I would just walk away. But we're missing out when you do that. So your first trigger, it will be basically the outcome. So again, before you get into confrontations or even while you're arguing, maybe if the person is not ready to cool off, but then they keep going, maybe you can just say in a nice way and say, I can't be with you at this level right now. We're not going to get anywhere. How about we wait till maybe tomorrow when you're not very upset with me?
Communicating it
Okay?
to them, right?
Yeah, you just tell them, is that okay? Because I don't want to respond to this right now. I cannot do this if you're not willing to listen, or if I'm not willing to listen, we're not going to get anywhere with this conversation. So, like what Leslie mentioned earlier, at 20 minutes of and no one's hearing anything anymore, then of course, that problem will never be solved. So sometimes, like what you mentioned also, EJ, earlier, we need to back off, but we just let the other party know that we're not ready for that
not
kind
just
of
walking away. Like you're
Sometimes
sitting
you have
facing
to,
each other, you
or
just like
yes,
stand
I've
up.
done that too. I've
it
done
gets
it where
a
I'm
lot
just,
worse.
it is. It is.
It gets
It's
a lot worse.
discouraging. It hurts.
Yeah.
Or
But
I've
yeah,
had.
letting them know that you need to you need to step over.
I mean,
this,
in arguments, I was the person who just wanted to win. Like I would almost call myself like a really professional debater. I
Were you in
would
the
line
debate
up
team
my
at
arguments and be ready, but again, it's just a matter of what is it we're trying to accomplish?
Yeah.
Like, am I like is my accomplishment being right? Probably most of the time, no. But
there's
that's
a
the
difference
thing.
with that,
That's the
right?
thing.
With being right and solving the problem, right? Like you can be right in a conversation or in an argument, but you can be right. But what's the cost of like being right? You know?
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, and then if you look at it also from like, let's say, a parent-child relationship, right? So I have children, and generationally sometimes there's misunderstandings. We don't necessarily get their lingo, we don't get their slang. I'm gonna freely admit that right now. Sometimes I don't. I have to ask. But again, it's like sometimes there's that misunderstanding of what certain words mean, right? So we have to talk things out. We have to be open enough. And of course, sometimes as parents or the adults, you're a little embarrassed to be considered the older ones, who are out of touch. But it's like, so there's, sometimes here's another part, ego, right?
Yeah.
Ego plays into assumptions and misunderstandings, because if you're not willing to let go of that, or if you have such a hard stance with your ego and you can't, or prideful and you don't want to back down, that's not going to help in any situation.
No, it won't. I definitely agree with that, because if you think about it, which one are you feeding? Which one would you rather feed, your ego or save a relationship? So you also have to be mindful, again, with your words, with what your personally end goal here, your true intent, especially if, let's say, if you're a couple or like what Leslie mentioned, a child and parent relationship, or a special someone in your life, or just somebody really, really close to you. So, once you acknowledge, once you clarify, you fix the problem, then also know your intent, because kind words, again, there you go. We can also do kind gestures, kind acts, kind words, even if, let's say, the other party is just really, really difficult to deal with. But I'm still a believer that no, that we can't solve a problem unless we communicate with sincerity and kindness. Because even if, let's say, the other person doesn't wish to do that, at least we did our part. At least we were able to relay them our true intent, our, main reason why we did what we did. And we were just trying our best to meet them halfway. And some I've experienced in my life where I've lost also friendships because, I don't know, the person changed to a point where that person no longer want to be a part of my life because they've changed, which is acceptable, which is that totally normal. People change, people evolve, and friendships, some they last forever. Some where we've been far apart for over 20 years, 30 years. But when we're together, it's like we didn't even separate. We just continue our conversation from yesterday, but that was really many, many years ago. So, we have different also levels of relationship with others. And depending on your relationship with that person or the people that you have in your life, or let's say in my life as well, you're willing to compromise. You would be willing to even sacrifice, just to make things work. You make your relationship work because at the end of the day, what really matters is, it's good to know that we're not alone. We have others who care for us and to make relationships work. And when it comes to, let's say, marriage, for example, right, or relationship with someone who you want to spend the rest of your life with, communication is indeed important. And when you have a misunderstanding, that's your go-to. And you gotta just, again, learn to maneuver and pivot your emotions towards what's most important than feeding your ego, your pride, or who's right and who's wrong. The minute you start having more and more negative, conversations and negative or knowing, it's almost like a battlefield where you're trying to win every single argument, but then you don't know that the end result will now be very impactful to where you can't even save the relationship anymore. So, that's painful. So, we just have to be really self-aware and be mindful of our behaviors and our words, our actions with others, no matter what relationship we have with them, to avoid misunderstandings. But when misunderstandings happen, of course, each of us already laid out on the table what some of those solutions are. But yeah, never assume, though, that assumption, that word.
Yeah.
Because then you're like assuming,
Yes.
Like, wait a minute, but I don't know. You gave me a word, but then you didn't complete the sentence. So here I am thinking, assuming the whole night. What is it? What is it?
And then that gets in your head, and then the more it
there you go.
perpetuates, and it just gets worse and worse. Yeah, no, I completely agree.
Like when actually one of the things that you mentioned struck to me, because this is also it was also something that someone mentioned to me, like especially how you word things can make all the difference. And the example that
It
they
really does.
the example they gave to me was that like saying, let's say you're talking to your friend, saying, there's a difference between saying you know you make me feel unappreciated, to saying I I don't feel appreciated lately, right? There's that's a whole world of difference there, because one puts the blame on them. It might make them feel like it was their fault, and one is just communicating how you feel to them, right?
And never use, I don't know about you, but I definitely agree with never use the you when it comes to arguments. You did this, so basically the YOU is you're already blaming the person. Definitely. And you're not accounting for your own mistakes as well. So when you say you, then the person is now receiving me. Well, wait a minute. But this wasn't just me. When they say it takes two to tango, It
Yeah.
also takes two to have misunderstandings. You can't,
Right?
unless you,
Yeah.
unless you're misunderstanding your own self when you talk to yourself in the mirror. That's a whole different
I
story.
think part of that too, like, absolutely, completely agree that, you know, how you say things, the words that you use matter, but sometimes things get lost in translation. And I
Yes.
think that's also something we just have to realize, right? And I think that's why sometimes taking it too personally, if you don't take it personally, you just kind of just say, I'm sorry, what did you mean by that? But it really makes a difference in saying, like, I had a bad day, you know, I'm kind of low energy right now, versus saying, oh well, this person did this to me and this and this, and I had this happen. And it gives a different, even just a connotation to your explanation. Like, it's almost like if you take on more of the accountability, I guess, of the misunderstanding first, sometimes it opens up to say, well, no, it wasn't you, it was really me who said this or did this or what. So I think sometimes if we humble ourselves, right, to say that maybe, even though we in our minds we also don't know we didn't fully do anything wrong, sometimes taking that first step of accountability and saying, I'm sorry, I might have misunderstood what you said, or I did misunderstand what you said, could you please clarify, or could we talk about this? And I think that coming at somebody on the opposite way of, instead of being you, it's on me, my bad, I might have done something wrong to you, let's talk this out. And I think people are more amenable to discussion versus being pointed at.
Yes, absolutely. Because there's if you think about it, when let's say I made a mistake, Melvie, you did this again. Melvie, you did it. Melvie, you. And instead of saying, or you, the person could absolutely rephrase it and say, I would appreciate it if you did it the way this, and the outcome would have been different.
Mm-hmm.
And, we really have to be careful with our words, because the you is, again, already, if you're the receiving end, I feel like I'm being attacked right now. I don't like this. This hurts.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, yeah, it is a reality that instead this approach didn't work. We were hoping you didn't flip it upon the situations, and that way we don't have to deal with more problems. Not that it happened, the way I'm saying. I'm just giving an example. I don't like making mistakes, but when I do, and somebody calls me out on it, there are some where they've done it in a really professional way, and there are some where it was just unprofessional. So I've learned to basically adapt with the different scenarios. And honestly, being the only Filipino in the building where I work right now has been quite challenging because, we also have that, let's say, cultural barrier. Or even when it comes to communications, our work ethic may be different in some ways, or our ways of communication as taught by our parents, right? So when I really have to be careful. So when I first started there, I had to observe a lot of their actions and reactions towards situations. And as I got to know them little by little over the years, I have now basically learned to communicate in different ways based on their different personalities, because one type of communication may not work with another person, because their approach is completely different. They're like plus and minus. So I have to ground myself. I have to learn how to adapt and definitely be more patient and understanding when it comes to their different personalities.
Taking that first step now, and like fixing, or like just in terms of like understanding, right? What needs to be done. And also I know that you both mentioned, like, like letting go of, like, letting go of pride, letting go of like ego, especially because like, especially if it's on a personal basis, like this is someone who matters to you, right? It's like your goal is not to win, it's to fix like fix the whatever arguments happening, whatever misunderstandings happening, So actually, just lastly, like how do you make yourself clear? Like when you're to avoid misunderstanding, how do you make yourself clear to you, the person that you're talking to?
I think for me, it's going back to going back to the facts. Laying out what the misunderstanding is. I'm a person who really likes to break things down, and understand piece by piece what could have gone wrong. You know, what led to something else. What was the cause of this? Was it a break things down and lay it out, and then still pieces of what went wrong. But that's just kind of how I think. I believe in intent, clear communications. Like sometimes we overthink the way we want to say something to where it doesn't convey the message we really wanted to say. So I believe in more direct and clear communications. I mean, not rude, not forceful, not aggressive, but clear. Like there's a main difference there. Is I clearly want to state what I feel about this or how I see this. I don't know if it's necessarily right, but this is how I saw it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, feel free to explain or, give me your side of what you see. And I think part of it is just, again, remaining calm and seeing the situation and expressing it the way I see it, whether I be right or wrong. So that's how I make myself clear. I intentionally bring it to the table and say, this is what I saw. This is what I heard. This is what I experienced. Yeah, lay it all out.
Laying out what
really,
you know. Like,
yeah,
this is what I know from my side.
This is exactly what I know, and this is what I'm going off of. So please correct me where I'm wrong, or if I'm missing some piece of information that I need so that we don't have this misunderstanding. Please provide that. Because I can only work with what I have and what I know and what I've heard and, what I interpreted, which could be wrong. But I would rather you correct me, in this conversation or clarify something, and we're good to go after
that. Is there anything you want to add, Melby, to that? So, like what Leslie said, it's like laying out your side of the story. Like this is what I know. This is what I know from my side of things. Like from what I can see, this is the information available to me. Let me know if it's if it's right. If I'm not getting anything. Yeah. If like if my understanding of this is like matching with your understanding of it from your side of things. Like so that's a very good way to make yourself clear in terms of avoiding right minimize, because we have to acknowledge that understandings will happen, arguments will happen, but there are ways to minimize it. Especially when you notice that it's about to start, and you both kind of went over this earlier as well. Like just nipping it at the bud, just before it even turns into an argument, right? Like nipping it at the bud already. And Mo, is there anything you want to add to that in terms of like how you make yourself clear?
For me, depending on the situation, but in a professional setting, I like to ask questions. I observe, and when I'm given instructions, and if there's something that I don't understand, I ask questions right there and then. And if let's say I have a misunderstanding with a coworker, I speak with a person right away. Like in a professional setting, it's completely different. I'm completely different person to where I'm more proactive because I want to fix problems. I don't want any problems as much as possible. I want to be able to come to work and just do my job and do my diligence of also being able to work with others well. And in a personal setting, on the other hand, or in my personal life, I too love to communicate. So when there's a heated argument that already occurred, whether if it's my fault or not, I initiate the first move most of the time. And then second, When I'm the one saying something to someone, I make sure they have ample time to either ask questions or clarify the matter right there and then to avoid any more misunderstandings or even escalate any kind of misunderstandings. So, as I've gotten older, I've become just more communicative. Like, I just love to communicate. That's just me. Let's fix it right here and then. That way we can move on. And whatever has occurred in the past, I definitely do not even want to bring it up. Let's let it go, move along, move on forward, and just be content and be happy and do our best to make each day count.
I would say
That's
as
me.
I got older too, I got less less confrontative about or less argumentative. Like my thought process also kind of goes now into like, well, let's like I feel like we're both too old to argue about this. Like let's just figure out what's the problem, what's wrong. Like let's lay out the facts on the table and let's see where we're not meeting in the middle. You know? Like it's I know it's like what's it? It's a learned. It's something that you have to. I know you have to learn. Maybe if you're like so if to our viewers, if you're maybe younger, you might still have a lot of those things. Don't worry. It's something that you'll learn. It's something that you'll learn to handle. And for us, we're just sharing our experiences when it comes to these things. You might encounter similar conclusions. You might come to similar conclusions. You might come to similar situations, but there's still going to be there's still going to be differences as well. And I hope that today's conversation has been an eye opener at the very least to or a reminder, I should say, to all of our viewers and to my friends here in the panel. And of course, thank you for joining me today. And is there anything you guys wanted to share just before we close off today's topic?
Um, yeah, I think, the keys to a successful um, clarification, I guess, of misunderstandings is understanding that on one side is ego and assumptions, and on the other side is sincerity, intent, and clear communication. Now, whichever side you choose to be on will be what determines how well your misunderstanding will be resolved. I think that's something that the three of us have definitely agreed on through the entire conversation. And I think that just those simple things, just letting go of ego, letting go of assumptions, and really focusing on not being right and making the situation right.
Melvi?
Communicate with care, learn and grow, and always be open to the to communicating with the people that you care about in order to solve the problems.
Again, thank you to my co-panelists for joining me in today's conversation, for sharing your thoughts with me as well. For sharing, both shared a lot of like great insights. I feel like I'd really learned as we went through our topic discussion. And to all of our listeners, to all of you, our viewers there in our team live chat, thank you as well for tuning in with us today. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us as well. And we do hope that this has been a conversation that mattered to you. And we do hope to see you again on the next episode of INCradio Chatline. We'll see you again next Friday. Thank you, everyone.
This is what I ask. Let me always dwell in the temple of the Lord till I bring my last.
Looking for more conversations that matter? INCradio Chatline, Fridays at 8 p.m. Pacific or 11 p.m. Eastern at INCradio DZEM 954 on YouTube.